Alright, round 4, aka the round the wheels fell off. We're playing against Turbo Land this round, which is a favorable matchup. Pretty good hand, a little slow, a little awkward. It's all like ground pounders. That, you know, if he gets like Call Me Garden draws, he can really slow me down. Drawing an untapped land there was pretty good because it means I can turn to the Knight. Is a Lotus Cobra on 2, which is pretty much the only way that the Turbo Land deck can really spike its percentages in the matchup. It's by getting a Cobra active. So here, I make a pretty big mistake. I play a Jace off of Knight, and I knew that I still had a land drop to make, and for whatever reason, I equated the land drop with Knight being untapped, but I needed to use the Knight to get double blue. So, in my crazy head, I had a blocker, but I didn't actually in reality. And so now all he needs to have is any land and a time warp, and Jace just gets eaten. And that's bad for me. What I should have done was bounce the Cobra, because then it forces him to have a fetch land and 2 time warps, or he's forced to legend rule the Jace, which is like time walking him because he doesn't get to replay the Cobra. Or, I'm sorry, because he doesn't get to just attack it with Cobra. So he'll like replay the Cobra, play an untapped land, Jace, and legend rule it, which would be okay by me. But like I could also Fate Seal, but Fate Sealing at this point is, it still makes Jace die to double time warp and doesn't force him to have a fetch in addition to double time warp, and it's not really getting any value out of the Jace if he just legend rules it. So bouncing Cobra's the play there, because Fate Sealing, you're not really doing anything, but if you bounce Cobra, then you force him to reinvest mana in it, and you know that takes a pretty big portion of his turn, especially when his next turn he's going to have like, you know, 5. It's going to be his 5th land drop, so like he could play, you know, Mind Spring for 4, or time warp off the tap land, or like there are so many things that he can do at this point in his development that throwing a wrench into it by setting him back a Cobra and forcing him to waste his turn to play a Jace would really be a nice tempo boost. And so then the turn after that I could play both my 3 drops off a Knight and really get aggro. But instead I brainstorm and expose it to time warp. I draw a billion lands, I put 2 lands back. I actually put a Sacher Step back there, and I should have just held on to that. The Sacher Step in hand, since I have 2 in my deck, I still have 1 in my library to fetch up if I need it. But having 1 in hand means that I can like attack with a War Monk and a Knight, and Sacher Step one of them naturally and one of them off of my other Knight, and get them both through, you know, an Avenger or whatever. And so having that Sacher Step in hand actually was more valuable than one of these multiple basics. So I probably should have just kept it. But none of that matters because he does have the time warp, excuse me, and eats Jace. He also has Oracle and then fetch, hits a land on top, and then time warps again. Which I wasn't, when he added blue mana to his mana pool, I was like, oh no, Mind Spring. But when he warped, I breathed a sigh of relief, except for his last card in hand is Avenger, and he spikes a land on top. So now he's like Avenger land and reveal warp, and I'm just dead. So I do a little dance and hope that he misses or whatever, but I can see. A draw like that, I'm only gonna be able to beat a draw like that with a nut draw of my own, which I didn't have. So even though I was able to learn a lot from that match, or from that game, it was pretty unwinnable, despite all the mistakes that I made. Let's go to the next one.